What's up, everybody? This is Harry Bernard Taylor with the Straight Up Wrestling Podcast Show. And today I'm going to tell you about the first man that actually caught my eye in professional wrestling. This is someone who actually made me pay attention to the sport of wrestling. I wasn't paying no attention to it. I was as a young kid, 5, 6 years old. I believe it was around 1972, 73. My brother Lois, my oldest brother, he was actually watching wrestling. I didn't know what it was. And I asked him, I said, what is this? Because at that time, there's only few things I watched outside of cartoons. If it wasn't a cartoon, I didn't want to watch it. But wrestling came on at that time during Gilligan's Island. And I wanted to watch Gilligan's Island, but my brother was watching this wrestling thing. And I'm bugging my brother, telling him, turn that. I want to watch Gilligan's Island. What is that? And he's watching wrestling, man. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm watching it a little bit, and and I had my eyes on it, but I just turned away, and I started playing with my toys again because I really wasn't interested. But he would watch it every week, so him being my older brother and everything, he pretty much took over the time slot, which I used to love to watch Gilligan's Island at that time. He was watching wrestling, and it never really caught my eye. And I will say he watched that thing probably a couple years, and it never really caught my eye. I was always in the background playing with my army men, playing with my cowboys and Indians, and maybe playing Rock'em Sock'em Robots or whatever. I never really paid attention to wrestling. I did like some sports. I liked football at that time. I liked basketball. I liked boxing, but I really didn't pay attention to wrestling. I really didn't understand it. I mean, maybe at that time it kind of, something kind of made me back off of it because of the brutality of it or the way the guys sounded. And so, I kind of like backed away from it. But my brother was really into this thing, man. And, I can remember a few names from back then. I remember George and Sandy Scott. Because they was like a mainstay in the Mid-Atlantic, areas or whatever. It was Jim Crockett Promotions. I think they called it Eastern Championship Wrestling back then. I'm not sure Eastern Heavyweight Championship Wrestling, but because I think they called it Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling a little bit later on when I was in probably 4th, 5th grade. But I remember George and Sandy Scott. I remember that name, those names, and I remember Nelson Royal. I remember Les Thatcher. I remember I remember a few names because, like I say, I would hear them every Saturday. And my brother, he probably watched he watched that show, and he would watch it on Sundays. And on Sundays, I really didn't care because there was nothing on TV for me to watch. So I would be sitting there. I would listen to it because, basically we was in the same room with each other, or we was in the same room where the TV was at. So, but my brother, he was all into this wrestling. But I would say, that had to be around when I was 5, 6 years old. Maybe I've been watching it a year and a half or so. And then around 1974, something changed. There was a wrestler that came in. There was a wrestler on TV one day, and they called him Chief Wahoo McDaniel. And everybody was into this wrestler who would come out with these, the big feathers and, come in with the Indian headgear and, all colorful and everything. And what I think sparked me the most is I heard that he had played football, and he played football back in the 60s. So I didn't get to see him play. I think he played from like 61 to 69. He played with the Denver Broncos, and then later on he played for the Houston Oilers. So I never did get to see him play, but I was interested in him because I heard that. And so I turned around and watched him maybe in a couple matches. And it was him and Johnny Valentine, I think, the first time I saw him fight. But like I said, it was brutal. Those guys will just deliver punches and chops, man, just hard as possible, man. It was brutal. So everybody really was getting into these guys. And then I think they had brought in somebody. They had brought in like Blackjack Mulligan, who was a big tough guy, and he got into it with Wahoo a few times. But I still never really watched those matches. I never really watched the whole thing of it. Watched the entirety of one of his matches, and then he was wrestling one Saturday. He was wrestling Professor Boris Malenko. I was 7 years old, and man, I remember this match down, packed, because everybody was talking about this match, and this Boris Malenko was like running roughshod over the territory at that time. And so this was supposed to be a big match on a Sunday, on a Saturday. It was supposed to be a big match. So my brother was watching it, and my little brother was watching it. My youngest brother, Antonio, he was watching it. He kind of got involved in it. So I actually turned around and started watching it, and my brother Patrick joined in. We watching it. So I'm watching it before this match happens, because everybody in the neighborhood was talking about Chief Wahoo McDaniel was going to wrestle Boris Malenko, Professor Boris Malenko. So I got involved in it, and I'm sitting there looking, and man, what a match it was. And Chief Wahoo McDaniel, he knocked Boris Malenko's teeth out. One of his chops knocked his teeth out, man. So I'm just like, oh my gosh. So that right there was when I actually took a liking to wrestling. I mean, it's not because he knocked his teeth out, but I took a liking to wrestling because for some reason I don't know. I just really wanted to see this tough guy who used to play football. I wasn't a fan of him. But like I said, my oldest brother was, and I think my youngest brother liked him a lot. I started going. I would go over to my grandmother's house. I used to go to her house every weekend during the school year. I would go to my grandma and stay with my grandmother, and my aunts and one of my uncles stayed there. So I would go there, and they watched wrestling every weekend. They watched wrestling, and so I was. Instead of playing with which I had a bunch of Army men and Matchbox cars, Army men, Cowboys and Indians over there, that I would play with all the time. So I stopped and I sat down and watched wrestling with them. My grandma every weekend, this was our routine. We would sit down and she would bring in those wafers. The Murray cookie wafers. We would eat those and drink a glass of milk. Each one of us would get I think it was like 50 cents a pack back then, or maybe 25 cents a pack. My grandma would buy them like it's 25 cents a pack because it was four for $1. So, but we all got to pick out whatever pack we wanted. But that was our little ritual. We sat down and we ate cookies and drank milk and watched professional wrestling. And they was all big, huge Chief Wahoo McDaniel fans. So that's when I really started paying attention. And I'm watching this wrestling, man. And there was a wrestler named Superstar. No, not there was a wrestler named the Super Destroyer who was actually coming up, man. And he was causing havoc in the Mid-Atlantic area at that time. So we had Chief Wahoo McDaniel. This Super Destroyer was the big, Blackjack Mulligan. Who else? You had Ric Flair at that time coming up, this right before the plane crash, and Johnny Valentine, and I think Blackjack Mulligan. And then you had, you had your George and Sandy Scott. You had, Nelson Royal, and you had Professor Boris Malenko. And let's see, I think it said less stature already, but he was like the man with the man of 100 holes, and Boris Malenko, who's I think is Dean Malenko's father. He was known for knowing every hole too. So it was I don't know, it was a great time, man. And I found myself sitting with my family, and we would, like I say, we would eat the cookies and drink milk and watch professional wrestling. And Chief Wahoo McDaniel, everybody was into this Chief Wahoo McDaniel. I forgot. Yeah, Paul Jones was another big one at that time. And he teamed up a lot with Chief Wahoo McDaniel to take on Ric Flair and Johnny Valentine. And the first I've known of Ric Flair is when Ric Flair had came into the territory. I remember him coming in as a rookie when I was younger. I think in 72, 73, he would team up with Rip Hulk. I do remember those two. And I didn't like those guys. I thought they was very mean. Being a small kid or whatever, I would turn around. My brother liked him, my oldest brother. I turned around and look at him. I thought these guys were very mean. So, hey, I didn't like them. But in 74, like I say, I'm sitting there with my family, man, and we watching this thing on channel, I think it was channel 4 in Greenville, South Carolina, on Saturday mornings Saturday afternoon, man. I think it came on at 1:00, and then it came on at like 10:00 Sunday night. Wide World Wrestling came on channel 13 out of Asheville, so we watched that. So, man, I'm getting into wrestling a good bit. But, the thing with my grandmother and my aunts and uncle, every Monday night they had wrestling at the Greenville Memorial Auditorium. So we would go to wrestling at the Greenville Memorial Auditorium every Monday night, $1. I think it cost 50 cents for me at that time, because I think kids, we got it for half price, but it was like $1. So we went wrestling every Monday night. Slam packed, Greenville Memorial Auditorium held between 6,500 to 7,000 people for wrestling every Monday night. Always a sellout. No ends and buts about it. It was sold out. Everybody's excited about it. And it was just basically per wrestling, man. They would show 5 matches. They would have like 5 matches, maybe 6. And bam, it was just wrestling. It wasn't really show or anything like that, because they didn't have the TV tapings during those times, man. But everybody go out there and you bought a lot of merchandise, and you just supported the wrestling, man. And everybody will always buy a program. Just like when I played high school football, we had the programs. Everybody come up and buy a program. That same thing that will happen in wrestling at those cards, and it was just great, and it went on for years. But I'm at 8 years old. I mean, this is one thing that's something that actually happened to me. When my family actually realized that I like Ric Flair. Ric Flair had came back. When he came back from that plane crash, he was a totally different person. I mean, he was a big guy, big burly guy, before the plane crash. And I mean, I would say in like 73, 72, 73, he was just a big, massive guy. And he was in that around 74, man, he was like getting to the point where he was getting cut. He was lifting a lot of weights at that time. He was hanging out with Ken Patera. That's another person who was in who was in the territory at the time, which is funny now remembering things. But I was 7 years old. But Ken Patera was, Ric Flair had started, at first he was a power lifter with Ken Patera, but Ric Flair had started lifting weights. And he was like 300 pounds. I think he got down to around 270, 260. And I mean, he started getting very muscular. And I mean, he had like a high fly, more of a high flying style. He was really quick, and he would come off the ropes. One of his finisher was an elbow smash coming off the off the ropes. And man, he would get up, man. He had a pretty good vertical. He would get it between 36 and I say 40, coming off of that vertical with that elbow drop, and bam. A little bit later on, he would just come and just do it without jumping high up in the air. I guess, like say, maybe to protect his back after the plane crash, because he did a lot of things to start protecting his back after the plane crash. But he came back in 75, and I remember we was at the Greenville Memorial Auditorium, and that's probably my third or fourth time going to see wrestling live, because it's just something that I just really didn't do, or I just didn't pay attention when we would go out there before. I didn't pay attention to it. I think I watched. We used to get a program, and I would look at those wrestling magazines for a while. I was just doing my thing while we was out there, because my grandmother and my 3 aunts and my uncle would go to wrestling. They would go every Monday night, and they would drag me with them. I mean, well, actually, during the school year, I didn't go with them because I was at the house. except for on the weekends. But I mean, well, on the weekends I was with them Saturday and Sunday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But on during the summer, I stayed with my grandmother the whole summer. So I would go to wrestling every Monday night with them in 74. And I think in 74 and in 75 is when I started paying attention. Ric Flair came back. He was flamboyant. His character had changed. That's when he started doing the Nature Boy thing, primping around the ring and doing his walk and everything, the loud woo. I mean, very strong. It was very strong at that time, man. When he did it in the arena, you just heard it all over the arena. I mean, Greenville Auditorium had great acoustics, so you heard him everywhere. But he was great, man. I mean, and just, people hated him. They hated him. It's kind of like if you look at MJF at this time, what MJF is doing right now. And MJF is 25, I think. He's 25. Ric Flair was 25 at this time. And Ric Flair was doing, he did so many things to hate people and make people hate him. And he went after the Chief Wahoo McDaniel, who everybody in the Carolinas loved. I mean, Carolinas, Virginia, everywhere that Tennessee, Eastern Tennessee, wherever Crockett was running cars, man, these people loved Chief Wahoo McDaniel, and Ric Flair targeted him. He was already wrestling him in tag team matches, teaming up with Wahoo McDaniel's most hated rival, who was Johnny Valentine at the time. But Johnny Valentine had got hurt in a plane crash, never to wrestle again. And that's one thing that just, man, even though I really didn't care too much about Johnny Valentine, it kind of hurt a little bit, man. I didn't like seeing these guys get hurt. But Ric Flair targeted, like I say, he targeted him as a solo wrestler, and Ric Flair was teaming up with Blackjack Mulligan at that time. But, man, I was like, it is just that one special Monday night, and I'll never forget it. Ric Flair was wrestling Chief Wahoo McDaniel, and a big smile just came on my face, man. Huge smile came on my face during that match. And once again, if you're checking me out on this podcast, this is Harry Bernard Taylor for the Straight Up Wrestling Podcast Show. And if you're on Facebook, hit that like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you on Facebook, hit that like and that share. And if people on Facebook and they listening to this, go over to YouTube and hit that like, that share, subscribe, and that notification bell. Even if you don't really go there and you like to listen to us on Facebook, still go there and hit us up with that HBO special. Help a brother out. So we would love for you to go over there and subscribe to us on YouTube. But back to the story, like I say, back to the story, man. My family, they caught a glimpse of me smiling when Ric Flair, because like I said, I was really captured, really captivated, by Ric Flair and his antics, man. The way he, pranced around the ring. Once he threw Wahoo through the ropes, man. He out there and he gave out that loud woo, woo, and man, big smile came on my face, and people were so mad. My family turned around and looked at me, man. I was like, I thought they was gonna jump me. I actually thought my family was gonna jump me. And those people in the crowd too that looked at me, and they was upset about it. They was upset about it. But they were like, "You like him, don't you?" I was like, "No, I don't. No, I don't." They were like, "Yes, you do. We see that big smile come over your face." And man, and I mean, I just saw a star in the making. I saw a star rise that day. And Ric Flair did that was the night he took a 2x4 and he busted it over Wahoo's head and put it, I think, like I forgot how many stitches, man. It was like, it was a lot. But he busted that 2x4 over Wahoo's head, man. That was just flat out crazy. I mean, and just made people even more upset with him. But I was hooked. I was hooked to professional wrestling from then on. And I go ahead and say it was Ric Flair, and the babyface that I really liked was Paul Jones. People was crazy about Paul Jones. I mean, a smaller wrestler, short guy who used to be getting beat down, man, but he would always come back, and all the fans used to call him PJ. Come on, PJ. Come on, PJ. Get him, PJ. Paul Jones will always make those comebacks, man, and win those matches at Greenville Memorial Auditorium. It was exciting. But like I say, man, nobody was tougher than that Indian. Nobody was tougher than Chief Wahoo McDaniel. Man, he gave the greatest matches. I mean, this guy was, at that time, man, back in that time when I first started wrestling, just the toughest SOB, man, that's probably ever walked in the wrestling ring. And especially at that time, man, I just didn't think nobody could touch him. But one thing, I would like to say is after the matches, man, my family because we always be at ringside or whatever. We always went back to the back, outside of where the wrestlers would meet. There was a certain group of people that would always go out there where the wrestlers would meet, and we meet up with the certain wrestlers that came out. And it was basically fan favorites that came out, and they would talk to you. The other ones wouldn't. They basically had to, They played that heel character to a T back then, man. That's just people just didn't break kayfabe. But we out there, and these wrestlers would come out, and my family and Wahoo would always come out. And he talked to whoever was out there, and people taking pictures with him and things like that. I remember my grandma and my family taking pictures with this guy and hugging up on him, and I'm just a little kid, man. They trying to bring me over there. I'm scared of this guy, man. Seeing how this guy chop people, man, and just beat people down in the ring, I was afraid of Wahoo McDaniel. But and for some reason, I didn't like him. And that just went on through my teenage years, man. All the way up, I just did not like him. And a lot of it has to do with because I like Ric Flair. But I just, Wahoo McDaniel had this meanness to him, man. But hey, maybe I should have liked him because I was pretty mean. I was a pretty mean kid, man. I was a mean teenager to a point. Not really mean to people, but just I had a meanness to me and a toughness to me. So I should have really liked Wahoo McDaniel. But like I say, man, it was his football career that just really turned me on to him. But man, big props to Chief Wahoo McDaniel. I give him all kind of credit, man, and I love him for turning me into a professional wrestling fan back there during this time. So, still to this day, the greatest Native American wrestler that I had ever seen, unless you add Jack Briscoe in there. But Jack Briscoe didn't, he didn't wear a headdress. Jack Briscoe, like I said, Jack Briscoe probably the greatest wrestler that I've seen that was Native American wrestler, and he's one of probably the top 5, top 7 that's ever done it. So, man, I just, but as far as wrestlers coming out, man, and wearing their headgear and representing Native American wrestlers, I never seen anybody do it as well as Chief Wahoo McDaniel. Maybe until I saw Jay Youngblood. And I like Mark Youngblood too. I saw Chief Jay Strongbow before that. He wasn't a Chief Wahoo McDaniel. So, I mean, then like I said, I saw some ones on smaller scales. A guy who's wrestling in APW, not too far from here, from out of Boiling Springs, South Carolina. Jay Eagle. I remember him in some smaller territories back when I was growing up. So, like I say, there was a few other ones out there, but nobody out there was like Chief Wahoo McDaniel. And if Jay Eagle, if you listening to this, or some of your fans listening to this, I'm sorry, man. But there's only one chief. There was only one chief to me in wrestling, and that was Chief Wahoo McDaniel. I mean, and he's a living legend, man, and he will live on. And man, great things from Chief Wahoo McDaniel. And thanks again for everything that you've done, everything that you did, Chief. And rest in peace, my brother.